Hello and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to take a look at this model here. This is the recently released Durafly T-28 Trojan. It's a 1100mm wingspan and it's in the US Marine Corps yellow colour scheme. Now we've been flying ours for a couple of weeks now, so I want to do a little video to show you what it's like to unbox and build. We'll talk about the finish and how you set it up, and then we'll do a little bit talking about how this thing flies before coming around in a summary. So let's quickly talk about the specifications. So as I said, it's a 43-inch wingspan, which is actually a nice size, isn't too big, and you can get it in the boots of most cars. Flying weight is about 1.5 kilograms, has a 40 amp ESC, a scale 3-bladed prop, which is a 10x6 pitch, and the minimum battery it recommends is a 2200 4S. Now we've actually used a slightly larger battery, but we'll come on why that is a little bit later. Lots and lots of scale features on this little guy. It has an air brake, it has flaps, LEDs in the tips of the wings, and mounted on the belly and on the top of the main fuselage as well. And they've also repeated one of the tricks that they used with the J3 Cub that they released about a month ago. That J3 Cub came with an Fpv mount in the kit, and that Fpv mount allowed you to very easily pop a camera inside the very clear canopy and fly it FPV as though you're actually sat in the cockpit, and that's the way that we've been flying ours a lot. Unpacking is very straightforward. The wing is one large piece. It has the retracts installed, it has the air brake, the flaps, and all the servos installed too. You're going to have to connect the servo rods and the little control horns in the control surfaces themselves, but that's pretty straightforward. On the top of that wing you have lots and lots of cables for all the different pieces, because you've got a gear channel, you've got the aileron, elevator, and you've also got the dive brake on here as well. After that you find the horizontal stabilizers. They go either side and slot in a very similar way to the J3 Cub actually, and the elevator is connected through the back of the plane. Again, you're going to have to connect the control servo onto that, but that's a pretty straightforward and easy job. All the servos for the rear parts of the controls are already installed. Once you've got those pieces out, then you are onto the main event, which is the main body of the plane, which does make it very easy to build. You're literally just going to have to pop on that big wing at the front, pop on the horizontal stabilizers on the back, and you've pretty much done the build. It's just a case then of wiring everything up to a receiver. Now in terms of the receiver, you are going to need at least 7 channels. We're using an X8R here to fly ours with, and the reason that we're using 8 channels is that we have a channel for the throttle, aileron, elevator and rudder, the standard 4 controls. We also need a control for the flap, one for the dive brake, and one to lower the gear as well. So that is 7, and then if you want to put a little pan servo in the canopy for your FPV equipment, that would be 8. Adding the FPV equipment is relatively straightforward. The mount that comes with it slides into the canopy and has a space for a simple 9-gram servo. We used a little metal geared servo in here, designed a little enclosure. Both the enclosures we use for this kind of smaller TVL 1000 line camera and a more traditional HS 1177 style camera are both on our Thingiverse pages. Pop the servo into the top of the supplied balsa wood piece, which has all been painted black to match the inside of the canopy, and then you pop your camera on the top, you slide everything in, and you're good to go. We mounted all of our FPV equipment out towards the tail. That did cause us a couple of problems balancing out the centre of gravity. That's why we needed a slightly bigger battery than a 2200 just to offset that additional weight out in the back. We didn't want an aerial sticking out at the top. We actually had it coming out of one of the ventilation holes at the back, and it's been working great. One word of caution, just do double check that the cables with these little labels on inside the canopy are coming from where they say they are. We had a couple of our little labels swapped over. Wasn't a disaster, very quickly easy to sort out, but don't rely on these labels. Just double check that they're actually connected to what you think they are before you start plugging everything together. In terms of the finish on the plane is really, really nice. I understand from Hobby King that they're using a slightly different moulding technique for these latest generation of models, and it shares the same finishing as the J3 Cub that we looked at about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now, the way it works is that the surface of the foam appears to almost have a skin on the front, and that skin is very smooth, which does give the finish a very nice appearance, and it doesn't look like a foam plane until you get really close up. There are some lovely scale details as well. The way the decals are applied, the scale prop, the exhaust that's on the side of the plane as well, all look fabulous. And as we move along the side, you can see the paint application's pretty good too. There is the LED at the top. That little white dome actually lights up. The LEDs that come on that give those kind of lights at the wingtips and on the body don't flash, but they are a nice scale detail. The tracks work really well. The front wheel on this is actually steerable, which means that you can move it around on the ground without any problems at all. Part of me is tempted to get a little bit of silver paint and actually paint up this white plastic in silver, because I think it's one of the few parts on the plane that doesn't look authentic when you're flying it around, and when you drop that gear, having it all appear white. And I'm not sure if it was actually white on the original model, but I expect it was probably a kind of a gunmetal colour, and we might paint ours just to match that. Just be careful with this foam skin. Hobby King do sell all the spares for this model in case you have a bit of a disaster. So once you've made the investment for this and you're flying around, if something goes horribly wrong or you mess up an approach and you make a mess of it, then you can replace parts. We've had a couple of tough landings in ours, and this is what the wing looked like after one of them, where it came in and did a little bit of a cartwheel over one of its wings. Now this looks terrible, but actually it's the same as the J3 Cub, and what we've realized is that all you have to do is get something like a hairdryer on a reasonably low heat, play it over the wing and the damaged area. So long as the paint finish hasn't come off, once it starts to get a little bit warm, you can use a lint-free cloth or a tissue just to gently push the finish back onto the wing, and it will look fantastic after the case. So if you do have a problem with this or the J3 Cub, that's my tip of the day. Just use a little bit of heat from a hairdryer. Don't go mad, you don't want to bubble the foam, you just need to warm it up, and then you'll find that the foam will come back into position, and you'll also find that the paint finish will reapply and it'll look great. Flying this thing is immense fun. A little bit of flap, little bit of throttle, and it's up in the air in about 6 to 10 feet. I found that with the throws that are in the manual, the elevator was still a little bit twitchy for me, so I dialed back even on the low rates the elevator throw, but even on low rates this thing is very capable of rolls, loops and aerobatics as well. It looks fantastic flying around in the sky. That beautiful yellow paint scheme, particularly when the sun catches it, looks fabulous. But the big thing that I love about this plane is that FPV ability. The inside of the cockpit has a sticker on for all of the controls, which when you're looking at it without the FPV stuff kind of looks a bit toy-like. But when you put the FPV camera in there and you're flying around, it becomes really immersive. That camera position in the canopy is actually quite well thought out, because as you can see here, it gives you a beautiful view, and the way we rigged our servo up to do the pan for the FPV was actually slaved onto the rudder. So as I moved the rudder around, the actual camera looked into the turn. Took a little bit of trimming for us. We got all of the control surfaces spot on, but we needed a little bit of aileron correction and a couple of other bits as well to get it flying perfectly straight and level, but once we did, it was great. Do watch that centre of gravity. The centre of gravity needs to be about 10-15 millimeters in front of the main rear gear that's actually underneath the wing. In the manual, I think it's 50 to 60 millimeters. I would definitely put it towards the 50 millimeters behind the leading edge for your centre of gravity. Ours flew a lot better in that position, and because of the huge space inside the canopy, you've got loads of room to put some reasonable sized batteries in there and put them exactly where you need to get that centre of gravity spot on. So for us, this is a very good looking scale plane. The flight characteristics are lovely. Even though it is very scale, it flies beautifully. It's nice and snappy, but it isn't going to bite you if you get into trouble. It's very, very easy to build. Just put those main wings on, the horizontal stabilizers, and then wire up your receiver and you'll be good to go. Do watch that centre of gravity and do watch that elevator throw. It is a little bit aggressive even on low rates, so just be aware of that for the first time you fly and when you're trimming everything up. But this is going to be one of those planes that we take to the field when it's a beautiful sunny day and we want to feel like we're sat in the cockpit flying a T-28. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. We try and release at least 2 videos a week, usually a quick tip on a Tuesday and a more in-depth video on a Friday, and sometimes we manage to get a few more out as well. If you're interested in radio control, then the playlists are useful to have a look at. Anything that's called Introduction To is an organised set of videos that teach you from first principles about the subject that you're interested in. But we also have information about the majority of popular open source flight controllers, how to build quadcopters, fixed wing models, reviews, setups, unboxing, all kinds of things in here as well. So if you haven't already had a look at the playlist, then I'd recommend going and having a look through here to see if there's anything that takes your fancy. Finally, we do also provide updates through things like Twitter, Instagram, and also post all of our 3D designs on Thingiverse as well. So if you like what we're doing here on YouTube, have a look at those things and subscribe to us there, and you'll find out what we're up to in advance of the videos coming out here on the channel.